Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Hardfire TV, a series of shows in which we discuss the economy. Today, the topic is a basic income for the United States, question mark, as we're questioning the current system, possibly replacing it with something better, okay? I'm your host, Tony Santoro, and specifically we'll be talking about basic income, the welfare state, reform of the bankrupt welfare state, as Dr. Weber at my left pointed. This is Dr. Cameron Weber.
Hello, everyone.
He's got a PhD in economics, one in history from New School for Social Research. He's also a professor at St. John's University in New York, and that's how I know him, as he's a colleague of mine.
Yeah. And we also play music together.
We fool around with some guitars occasionally and mess around with music.
So we'd like to have a minute for Chuck Berry.
Yeah, well, not a full minute, but we want to mention Chuck Berry, R.I.P.
Yeah.
I think, I hope you people caught the WKCR tribute to Chuck yesterday on the radio. In the morning, they did a wonderful tribute and played a whole lot of his best tunes. So,
my dad used to have his 45s in his house, in my grandmother's house.
They're probably very valuable today, more
Chuck
valuable
Berry.
than they were, say, Friday. The value's gone up
Appreciate
incrementally.
that, Tony.
Yeah, okay. Cameron, thanks so much. Now, to start, what exactly is a basic income, and what specifically about this idea are we talking about today?
Okay. The way right now we have a welfare state that certain people get food stamps, certain people get corporate welfare. So right now, certain people get social welfare, certain people get corporate welfare. The idea is to replace all of this, which goes to certain people, with a basic income that goes to everyone. So the idea is to replace the existing welfare state which goes to certain people, with a basic income that goes to everyone. And what I'm talking about today is I have a chapter in this book called Basic Income in the Free Market. And this data is from 2010, from 2010. And I've recently updated the information for 2015 as part of this. This summer I'll be participating in the 16th annual Basic Income Congress. So people have been talking about the basic income for 16 years, and I think Norway, one country, has implemented it. I'm not exactly sure, but the idea
Sounds like something Norway would do, after all.
The idea is to make the economy more fair. Right now, welfare goes to certain people and not everyone. So the idea is to make equality and generality under the law, where basic income goes to everyone equally.
Okay.
That's the basic income.
All right, so essentially the issue is the inefficient and cronyism welfare state in the USA. Could you talk a bit about cronyism? Let us know what that's all about.
Sure. Well, corporate welfare is an example of cronyism, where the EPA or the Department of Commerce or the International Trade Commission or the Ex-Im Bank gives certain grants or subsidies to some companies and not other companies. So depending how politically well connected you are determines whether or not you get a subsidy. And so that's cronyism, is that the subsidies go to certain businesses. And it also affects regulation. Certain companies get better regulation because they're cronyists, because they're in with the political system. So they get better regulatory treatment than others, right? So the cronyism just means certain people getting better treatment under law. And that's popular democracy in a huge nation state.
So what you're proposing is a flat rate given to every citizen in the United States
Exactly.
Over the age of 18, I think, right?
Yeah. The age 18 and over, my calculations show that you can get rid of all social and corporate welfare, which goes to certain people, and you can give almost $1,000 a month to every single person age 18 and over, which is.
So you say almost. So there's some variation there.
It's about $9,500. It's about $970 a month per person age 18 and over for the figures for 2015, and that's about 75% of the population is 18 and older, would be getting a basic income, and what's the best part about the basic income right now, you have bureaucrats and technocrats and politicians determining food stamps. All right, you get what, $400 a month to buy food, here's your food stamps, right? How do these politicians know better than the individuals? Here's your $100 a month for transportation. How do the politicians know better than individuals? Here, agribusiness, here's your $1 million for not planting corn today. So the idea is to get rid of all of these government set schedules and give cash to people, and then that would create economizing behavior. And then you would expect to see the economy pick up speed a little bit because people will be getting cash instead of these cronyist state-set price schedules for different things.
So when you talk about the welfare state, you're not only talking about the poor, but you're talking about corporations as well.
Yeah, let me just, for example, yes, there's social and corporate welfare. Social welfare is the Department of Health and Human Services. They're the ones that do Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and the Affordable Care Act. And then Social Security, Department of Education, Department of Labor is social welfare, and then HUD is social welfare. But corporate welfare is Department of Agriculture, Department of Commerce, Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, NASA, Department of the Interior, EPA, Corps of Engineers, and the Small Business Administration is all corporate welfare. So the idea is to get rid of all social and corporate welfare, replace it with the basic income because it would create everyone equal under the law. Everyone's getting the basic income, and you won't be lying on your income tax anymore for social welfare because it's not means tested. Everyone gets it no matter what your income is. So it reduces the incentive to remain poor. You're
proposing a radical well, I wouldn't say redistribution of wealth, but redistribution of government, essentially. Would you say?
Yes.
So basic government as we have it now. Would you talk about how this would then your proposal would
Yeah, you need most economists agree that you need a basic government, and a basic government is basically the rule of law. And so like I said in this book, a basic income and the free market, I describe what basic government is, and that's the government that was created under our first president, George Washington. He created certain departments, and these were the only departments in place until 1847, when Zachary Taylor did the Department of Interior. But the basic government, or core government, or what most economists agree are necessary, would be Department of Defense. Most economists agree that national defense is a public good. And I'm also including, being generous, I'm including the Department of Homeland Security. Even though we know that's a big bloated bureaucracy that's out of control, blowback due to our foreign policy, but out of staying true and conservative in measurement, I'm including Department of Homeland Security as basic government. But so what we have is basic government is Department of Defense, Treasury, Justice, State, the legislative branch, and the executive office of the president, Department of Veteran Affairs, Civil Defense Programs, and Department of Homeland Security. So that's basic government or core government. Right. And that's 35% of government spending is basic or core government, and welfare spending, both corporate and social welfare spending, is 65% of federal government expenditures in 2015.
Now you're also including, though I notice, Environmental Protection Agency as part of corporate welfare.
Corporate welfare.
Could you discuss that a bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Environmental Protection Agency, like I said, that's part of corporate welfare. The EPA gives certain grants to certain people to do things, right? And not to other people. So only certain people get those grants, for exploring ways to reduce pollution or effluent systems into streams. Only certain companies get those research and development funds, usually the well-connected companies and the bigger companies who contribute to campaigns. So that's corporate welfare. And like I said, also with regulations, certain companies would say get special deals on mineral rights in Department of Interior, as regulated by the EPA. So these certain companies get special regulations or grants or subsidies. So that's cronyist social welfare. Yeah. The most egregious example is is the Department of Agriculture. The Department of Agriculture by far is the largest corporate welfare at $126 billion a year.
Now, when people think about the Department of Agriculture, though,
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about agriculture, we think about farmers. You know, the image that comes to mind of these, you know, people struggling just to grow crops and that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah,
I guess that's a bit of a myth.
That's a 1930s myth. Now the corporate welfare under the Department of Agriculture goes to huge agribusinesses to plant ethanol, right, for ethanol-based gasoline, and the trade barriers against the foreign importation of agriculture stuff. So the agriculture, Department of Agriculture is a huge corporate welfare, giving research and development to cotton growers, you know, to wheat growers, just this huge corporate business, and that's again, that's American democracy. Is the agriculture bill, the way it's written now, is funds the food stamps in the cities, and then it funds the huge agribusinesses in the rural areas. So the Democrats and the Republicans both vote for each other's food stamps and corporate welfare under the agriculture bill, and then you know, they fight about it, but in the end they vote for each other's corporate and social welfare, and that's like I said, $126 billion for the Department of Agriculture.
All right, so it looks like your plan would be to replace the welfare state in the United States,
Yeah.
both corporate and social.
Yeah.
So how much basic income would everyone get?
Right. So the idea is to replace the 65% of federal government spending, or $2.4 trillion, $2.4 trillion in
Yeah.
corporate and social welfare, and replace that with a basic income, which would be $9,700 per person, $9,700.
Annually.
Yeah, $10,000 a year
Right.
per person, age 18 and older in the United
That's
States.
every citizen over 18 would get this.
Well, citizen is not necessarily what I would like to.
That term doesn't quite fit your plan a bit.
Anybody living in the United States
Oh,
would be my plan.
people with green cards would get the $1,000.
That whole green card thing is a scam anyway. People come here to risk their lives to come here to the United States. You know, let's not go there. Let's not go there.
Well, you know, we want to be clear though, and just want to.
Well, the census. My data is from the Census Bureau, and the Census Bureau counts non-citizens as well,
Okay.
or non-green card holders, or red card, or whatever card you're holding on a particular moment. But the other point is that the poverty level, you know, whether or not we can believe the official U.S. government poverty level figures, is around $12,000 a year for the lower 48 states. So the basic income of $10,000 a year would mean that almost every person lives above the poverty level. Yeah, right. So it's basically, there would be no poverty because we're replacing the poverty as measured with the basic income. You know,
It's a way to win the war on poverty, which they haven't been able to do for years and years.
Yeah, there's always a war on something. War on terrorism, war on poverty, war on communism,
Okay.
war on, what else?
Too many.
War on fear. Yeah, fear. Yeah.
Now, your plan, you posit, would in fact affect economic growth as well. So it'd
Yeah.
be good for the economy. Just give us a brief idea of how that would work.
Well, if you replace the welfare state, just say social welfare, which is about 85% of all welfare, and just give people cash, give them a basic income instead of giving them vouchers. Then they start they start thinking towards the future. Hey, I've got cash. I'm going to buy this, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to buy this, instead of a voucher which tells them how much housing they can have, how much food they can have. If you replace it with cash, then they start thinking towards the future. It's no longer a crisis day-to-day poverty situation. They're part of the cash economy. They have more freedom of choice. And like what's important is that everybody gets the same amount, right? So you replace the bureaucratic set prices, schedules, and replace that with cash. So people start economizing. So you would expect to see more economic growth.
Question.
Yeah.
This roughly $1,000 a month. It goes
Yeah.
to the citizen. Well, it goes to the
$10,000 a year, so about 900.
It goes
a
to
month.
people in the population. Does it go to corporations at all?
No, no, right. So
Corporate welfare is essentially shut off.
yeah, you get
Shut down.
Yeah, you get rid of all of those agencies that I read.
Sounds good. Yeah.
You get rid of all corporate welfare, and that's what makes a lot of people angry is the corporate welfare.
Make a lot of people happy if this was in effect. And
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier before we went on the air that this actual plan has been working well in Norway.
There's been an experiment. There was one experiment, kind of a famous experiment, where they did it in the United States in one city. I'm not exactly sure where it's being implemented right now. I think they did a referendum in Switzerland about it that was voted no. But the other thing I wanted to mention in terms of the equality and generality under the tax law, we're replacing the Democrats like the social welfare in the cities, right? They like giving food stamps and housing vouchers because it assures the Democrats' votes, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get rid of this partisan stuff and give cash, basic income, you get rid of the politics behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you start opening up more wide, less cronyist politics. But one of the in terms of equality and generality under the law, I'm also recommending tax reform. So you would get rid of all you'd get rid of all taxes as they are now, which is very, very complex. The tax system in the United States is a larger business than is the automobile industry, just complying with U.S. taxes. You get rid of all tax schedules, all tax forms, and you replace it with a single tax. So just like, let me see here. Okay, here it is. So what I'm calling government and basic income, right now the federal government is 19% of the economy. You replace the 65%, which is corporate welfare, and the government is still 19% of the economy.
Mm-hmm.
The basic government and the basic income would be 19% of the economy. So what you would do of the federal spending, 19% of the economy. So what you would do is get rid of all federal taxes and just have a single tax of 19% on personal income. So just like everyone would be treated equally under the law getting the basic income, everyone would be treated equally under the law by paying the same tax, which is the size of the federal government, which in 2015 was 19%. So you replace all taxes with a single personal income tax of 19%.
So personal income tax, corporate income tax wouldn't factor in either.
No corporate income tax.
They need to get any welfare, and then they don't get taxed. So.
Well, in the end, all taxes are paid by the consumer anyway. And the United States has the highest corporate income tax in the developed world, however we're defining that. So that's a problem. That is for those who pay the corporate income tax,
Mm-hmm.
those who are not cronyist, who don't get special tax breaks. But so the United States, it's well known that corporate income tax is a counter incentive towards capital accumulation and investment. So the idea would be to get rid of all of the complicated tax schedules and just have a personal income tax of 19%, just like personal individuals are getting the basic income. Because in the end, the consumer pays for all the taxes anyway, right? Because they're the ones who are paying the price. So it doesn't really matter who's paying the taxes. But to be fair, I'm suggesting everyone pay a single rate because everyone's getting the basic income.
Everyone's getting the basic income. Everyone will take the basic income happily.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they'd be liable to pay their taxes, which in some cases in the country, not everyone bothers to pay their taxes or finds ways to beat it.
Yeah.
So
So
alleviates that situation as well, doesn't it?
yes, it removes the incentive for cheating the IRS because everyone's treated the same. Yeah, and so it could either be a personal income tax, or else it could be a value-added tax. It could be a single value-added tax. So if the federal state is 19% of the economy, then you would have a single sales tax of 19%, and that would pay for the federal government. So you just have a single tax, and that single tax would either be a personal income tax or else a value-added tax or a sales tax at 19%, because the federal government is 19% of the economy. Okay. So that's my recommendations for the basic income.
Okay,
yes.
just so our audience is clear then, so your proposal essentially is this $1,000 roughly per person in the country replaces Social Security,
Yeah, it does.
replaces welfare,
It does.
replaces, say, disability benefits. Everything gets replaced with this.
Yeah, and right, Tony, and so right now you have the state pretending to provide for people, giving them vouchers. You know, here's your chicken feed. You know, vote for me, right? If you get rid of all of that, the federal, state, corporate, and social welfare pretending to help people, and replace it with the basic income, you might get a lot more mutual aid, and where people are actually helping each other. Instead of dependency upon the state,
Mm-hmm.
people are helping each other. Right, so you would get rid of all of these things that you've named, and replace it with $10,000 a year cash, and hopefully people will start helping each other like they did prior to the 1930s and the buildup of the corporate of the social welfare state and corporate welfare cronyism. You had mutual aid organizations, religious organizations, ethnic organizations, immigrant organizations, neighborhood organizations.
It's amazing how
you see it in Astoria, all of the vestiges of these Greek societies and things like that of mutual aid organizations prior to when the state pretended to help people.
Exactly. And if you go back to the 19th century, you find out that, for instance, the public school system was a grassroots thing. It didn't come from the
Right.
government. It didn't come from the state.
Right.
You know, a lot of these, social organizations sprung up
Yeah.
from the people.
Exactly.
That's gone totally out the window.
That's what Alex
except for
DeTocqueville.
Astoria, as you mentioned.
Well, sure, and there are still some volunteer fire departments, I guess, and there are mutual aid organizations, but these mutual aid organizations that exist would just get boosted more with a basic income tax as you replace the inefficient and crony corporate and social welfare with a basic income. And I'm arguing for the basic income because it's more economic, right? And it provides its equality under the law, and it gives individuals more determination over their lives, right? And what I would expect to see under a basic income, so right now the core government that I mentioned is about 6% of the economy.
Mm-hmm.
The federal government, core federal government, is 6% of the economy. And then that makes the basic income or social and corporate welfare 13% of the economy. What I would expect to see is as the economy becomes more efficient due to the replacement of the welfare state with a basic income, that people would start to then, wait a minute, I'm not so interested in paying 19% tax anymore. We're becoming more and more wealthy. The core functions of the federal government are 6%. Maybe I would like less of a basic income and less tax rate as the economy is growing more, as we get rid of all these huge inefficient bureaucracies.
Another byproduct, I'm guessing, would be, well, one reason I think the government is so generous with welfare is it puts people in a position where they kind of owe the government something, and they let the government do whatever it pleases. So now it's a question of control.
That's the welfare warfare state.
Welfare warfare, huh?
Welfare warfare state.
Welfare warfare.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which was put in place in the 1930s
Mm-hmm.
in preparation for World War II, right, where we had the largest peacetime draft in American history, the only peacetime draft in American history, under the welfare warfare state created under the New Deal Yeah, but back to this book. I don't mean to keep pumping this book, but
Hold it up nice and high. Here it is.
Basic Income in the Free Market. Yeah,
By Dr. Cameron.
I have my chapter in here is basically what I just described.
Okay.
But my friend Peter Bedke, who's an economist at George Mason University, he describes how in this book how difficult it would be to transfer from today's social and corporate welfare to a basic income because of all the special interests who are involved. So he's skeptical that it could actually be done. So it is something of a utopian idea, but it's nice to talk about it and to think about it.
Okay, well, great. You know, we've done a couple of shows on Hardfire on these topics, and you can find them on the YouTube if you care to look them up and, you know, find out more about these issues and ideas, basically. Any closing thoughts? We've got about a
on
couple minutes here.
YouTube. On YouTube, oh yeah, you can see my paper on CameronEconomics.com, which you'll see in the credits. You'll be able to read my basic income paper on my website, and then to find Hardfire shows on YouTube, just type in Hardfire TV Brooklyn Free Speech Cable is where we are.
Hardfire TV, Brooklyn
yeah.
Free Speech Cable.
Yeah.
There you go, folks. So if you care to further inform yourself about these topics, these are great ideas. As Cameron mentions, they're radical ideas, and
we have more than but we can try, and we have more than 100 shows on YouTube.
Yeah.
I've produced about 15 shows, and my predecessor, who put the show together, Gary Popkin, did more than 100 shows.
Mm-hmm.
So between that, there's a lot of Hardfire on these political economy issues, libertarian issues that you can find on the internet.
Yeah, and you mentioned libertarian issues. You know, I know you're very
Right.
active with the Libertarian Party. Well, I'm sure a lot of these ideas jibe with their ideas.
It's basically right, free minds and free markets, and
Mm-hmm.
small state and mutual aid, and that's why we're talking about the basic income today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And we know that whatever they've got in place right now is not working for most of us.
Yeah, a lot of
So,
people are angry.
a lot of
look
people
at the
are angry, and guess-
result of the election.
The result of the anger, we see what's in the White House now. President
Even
Trump,
more anger.
two words that should never go together. President Trump, sort of like mother's orgasm or something like that. Two words that don't belong together.
Okay.
Anyway, we've done a couple of shows on Hardfire that you can look for. Okay, essentially, this has been about the notion that we can give a basic income of $1,000 or so to every person in the United States and eliminate all welfare and that sort of thing, corporate and social. United States citizens or anyone in this country, no more
Yeah.
welfare or Social Security. This would definitely be a big change. Let's put it that way. But I think, as Dr. Weber points out, it would certainly be a change that hopefully would certainly inspire the population to maybe think more about taking care of themselves and not be
Right.
so indebted to the government. You know, which is not a
Very
good thing
good.
at all.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and speaking of, yes, it is a radical idea, but at first they laugh at you and then they steal your ideas.
Okay. Thanks so much, Dr. Weber. It's been a pleasure to have you on Hardfire,
Thank you.
and we'll see you again, I hope.
Yes, sir. Thank you for hosting, Tony.
You're welcome.